Hello, parents. Welcome to our presentation on the aspects of adolescent development. Today, I'm joined here by fellow colleagues Brianna Rodriguez, Chang Vu, Cassandra Perez St. Antoine, and Pia Sellers. First up on our presentation, we will be reviewing the cognitive influence on adolescent development. And we have Brianna Rodriguez presenting.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our parent workshop today. So Pia and I will be covering this portion of cognitive development. Here we go. So to begin, what is cognitive development? So cognitive development are changes in problem solving, memory, language, reasoning, and other aspects of thinking. So by this stage in adolescence, our children should be able to distinguish between truth and validity, use deductive and inductive reasoning, which we'll go into some examples on the next slide of what deductive and inductive reasoning are. But let's go ahead and go over deductive reasoning. So it's drawing conclusions by applying rules or principles, logically moving from a general rule or principle to a specific solution. Whereas inductive reasoning is formulating general principles based on knowledge of examples and details.
And then there is hypothetical deductive reasoning, which is formal process of problem solving, identifying different factors that might affect a problem and deducing or evaluate specific solutions or outcomes. Megacognitive skills are skills to self-regulate based on knowledge about your own thinking process. And again, Brianna will go ahead and share in more depth about this shortly.
So when we look at inductive reasoning, this is typically what develops first. So this reasoning is also known as bottom-up reasoning, which we have a little graph here. What this is a type of reasoning in which specific observations or comments from those in authority may be used to draw general conclusions. So for example, a child might see a dog. A dog has fur and has 4 legs. Therefore, all animals with fur and 4 legs are dogs. To apply this to a more realistic example, if I am driving to work at 7 in the morning every day and I'm always on time, therefore, if I leave at 7 a.m. to work today, I will get there on time. Now, this is where we begin to differentiate between truth and validity. There may be some validity in what I just said. However, we all know with LA traffic, that's not always true. So Pia will go ahead and talk about deductive reasoning.
Thank you, Brianna. Yes, so deductive reasoning starts with some overarching principle and based on this proposes specific conclusions. So looking at the facts and being able to predict the result. If something is true, something else must be true also. For example, there is no mail delivered on holidays. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving. Therefore, my check won't be delivered tomorrow. Another example is that all athletes work out in the gym. LeBron James is an athlete. Therefore, LeBron James works out in the gym. So deductive reasoning guarantees a truthful conclusion if the premises on which it is based are accurate.
So we'll go ahead and get into metacognitive skills, or what we also call metacognition. So this is the ability to plan, monitor, and regulate one's thoughts and activities. Research shows that metacognition is a fundamental skill and it can be taught and learned. These skills are vital for a child's academic and career success. Now here off to the left, we have something called a star chart method. This is just one example, and let me go ahead and bring this a little bit enlarged for everyone to see. So here we have a chart where it'll help our children really think about problem solving. We can provide them with a situation, S, T, task, A, action, R, result. This really helps our children in practicing those critical thinking skills. And at the end of today, we'll go ahead and have a handout for all of our parents to take this home and feel free to practice these different critical thinking skills at home with your kids.
And then there's hypothetical deductive reasoning is the ability to develop hypotheses or best guesses to solve problems and to be able to problem solve and deduce the options to solve the problem. So in adolescent years, teens become more scientific and logical in handling problems. So an example of hypothetical deductive reasoning would be that, let's say that my daughter, she attempted to bake cookies for me, but the first batch were burnt. So in her mind, she considers the plausible causes, thinks about the ingredients, maybe too much of something, too much milk or too little of something, maybe the temperature or leaving them in the oven for too long was it. So she essentially decides that it's the temperature or the time, I'm sorry. So she puts in the next batch for a shorter period of time and then evaluates this, did this work or not? Versus in younger years where their thinking is to change several variables all at once, putting in for less time, adding more ingredients, changing the temperature. So in adolescent years, it really is just being able to problem solve more logically. And then some factors that affect cognitive development in adolescence. So there's the environmental, there's parenting styles. More specifically for parenting styles, there's something called authoritative and then authoritarian. And so in authoritative styling of parenting, it's defined as having high warmth or high control, meaning having clear expectations, rules are enforced, but also being able to share warmth, being caring, showing more acceptance. Versus authoritarian parenting is one that I'm more familiar with because I'd say my parents parented this way, was having clear expectations, having high expectations, being more cold, not really accepting or warm. And then there's cultural effects, right? There's spiritual, religious beliefs that impact the way students think, affects their decision-making based on their beliefs. As far as biological, there's ADHD. With this affects cognitive development. Challenges differ because, or just being able to know what tools may or may be helpful for the student. And this is important for you parents in communicating with teachers and school counselors, any concerns that you may have. If your student is able to focus or their attention span you notice is limited in certain areas, these concerns do affect learning and accommodations do need to be made, and we can support that. So the sooner that we know that, the better. And then also there's social texting, right? We know that texting is a new means of communication, right? Using acronyms, BTW, by the way, or there's language registers, the way that they speak to fit a social group. For example, certain terminology. This might be an older one, but the bomb, that was the bomb, you know, that was cool. Or saying that was lit, that was fire. To me, I'd be like, what's on fire? But nowadays, the youth, right, they say that's fire to describe something that's awesome or that's cool. Mall speak, right? Overusing of words like that, like I went to the mall like yesterday. And, you know, so it's not just your student, it's not just your youth, it's not your child. That's common again within adolescence. And they are all important to be aware of because these are how our youth are learning. Making these connections, right? This is the stage where kids are trying to fit in, where they're learning about themselves. They're curious, learning from their environments in their home and outside of the home is vital.
All right, thank you, Pia. So now to get into some strategies on how you can support your child in cognitive development. So we want to encourage child to share ideas and thoughts with adults, encourage child to think independently and develop their own ideas, compliment and praise adolescents for well thought out decisions, and help in reviewing any poorly made decisions. So we'll briefly go over some of those examples and what they could look like. So one, to encourage child to share ideas and thoughts with adults. It could be something hypothetical. So you're sitting at a dinner table and maybe something happened at work for mom, and mom shares how she had to deal with a difficult patient during her shift, and she shares how she handled the situation, but she wasn't sure if she handled it appropriately. So she turns over to her daughter and she asks her daughter, what would you have done in this situation? Now placing her in the situation of the mother, and really encouraging her to share her thoughts and ideas to problem solve. So again, using those metacognitive skills, hypothetical deductive reasoning. This is one way to help in support of cognitive development. Another example would be to encourage your child to think independently and develop their own ideas. So in high school, John's decided to join ASB, but he's afraid he's going to be overwhelmed with his AP and honor classes, as well as being on the JV tennis team. He speaks to his parents and he wants to know what his parents think he should do. This is a moment where parents should really encourage John to really think for himself. Well, what do you think is best? Because we're setting up our children to move on after high school. We're not always going to be there to make decisions for them. We're really encouraging our children to make decisions for themselves. So his parents are there to guide him rather than to decide for him. And with the guidance from his parents, John was able to come up with a decision to join ASB. And if it became overwhelming, he would then not rejoin ASB for the following year. Compliment and praise adolescents for well thought out decisions. So you let your daughter go to a high school party, you give her some rules, absolutely no drinking alcohol. Unfortunately, we know sometimes at high school parties, there will be some alcohol. So Jane is there enjoying the party with her friends. Most of them are drinking and she makes sure to listen and she does not drink any alcohol. However, her friend becomes a little bit intoxicated and she's concerned for her. So she calls her mom to not only pick her up, but her friend as well. When Jane's mom gets there to pick her up, opposed to focusing on the negative, this is why I don't let you go to parties. This is bad influence around you. I'm never letting you go to a party again. Just focusing on all that negative, we should focus our attention on praising Jane for her well thought out and responsible decisions. She called you, you picked her up, she brought her friend with her because she was concerned for her friend. Her friend was highly intoxicated. So we really want to praise these moments and these well thought out decisions. And lastly, to help in reviewing any poorly made decisions. So you have found out that your son has secretly been using social media, even though you told him he should not have any social media until he's in high school. You can sit with him and discuss his reasoning for making an account behind your back. Then have him reflect on his poor decision and how it can possibly affect the trust between yourself, the parent, and him. Really get him to start thinking, well, if my parents told me I can't do this, but I went behind their back anyway, I've disappointed my parents. Let him know that it is a disappointment opposed to harsh punishment and get him to think about the decision he has made and how he could have done better. So we'll go ahead and wrap up cognitive development, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Cassandra.
Hello, I'm going to talk about the physical changes and developments in your children that you're going to be seeing. So we're going to talk about puberty, brain development, sexual development, and then end up with nutrition and exercise. So in puberty, really we're looking at, you're going to see a lot of rapid growth, bones, internal organs, and the primary focus here would be the primary and secondary sex characteristics, right? So primary, we're looking at the organs that are directly involved in reproduction. So we're going to see growth in males and the testes, the penis. And in females, we're going to see growth and maturation of the uterus and the ovaries. And then we're going to see a lot of the secondary sex characteristics. That's what we're really going to see in your children, right? So changes in voice, changes in facial hair and pubic hair. So that's what is going to be seen. And that can cause some issues in children, right? We see that in body composition, you're going to see a distribution of fat, you're going to see a growth of muscle. And all of this is going to come at different times, right? So there is early maturity and there is late maturation. And with both of these, we're going to see different things happen in kids, right? So with early maturation, with early puberty, you might see some possible emotional difficulties in girls, some depression, some anxiety. And in boys, they may be popular because they have experienced this maturation early, but internally you might also see some depression, some anxiety, possible drug use. In girls with later maturation, you might see fewer problems, but they might worry that something is wrong. And in boys, you're also going to see a lower self-esteem, but later on in life, they're going to be more creative, more perceptive, more tolerant. So you're going to have both positives and negatives with both early and late maturation. For brain development, their brains are still developing, right? Their frontal lobe, which is the part that actually can make cognitive decisions and evaluate if something is right or wrong that they're going to do. Their frontal lobe might not fully develop until age 25, right? So your kids' axons are still getting myelinated. So it means that it's a covering over the axons that help the axons function faster. Their neural connections are going to increase, but then they're going to get pared down so that the connections that they have are longer lasting. They're going to be stronger. And by the end of adolescence, so 18, 19, that frontal lobe is getting much better at identifying all of these risky behaviors, right? These risks will actually be evaluated for the long-term consequences, not just immediately what's going to feel good. Okay. And we spoke a little bit about sexual development already, but the limbic system is going to mature. Okay, so they're going to respond to pleasure, they're going to respond to emotional stimulation, and you might see that at home with just differences in hormone levels. Really, what we see is that comprehensive sex education. What we see is that comprehensive sex education is going to reduce things like teen pregnancy. So the more information that they have about their own sexual development, the better armed they are in order to make choices. You can help your student by supporting their sexual development, by talking openly about these things, and not making it a taboo thing. That way they might actually talk to you and come to you with questions about their sexuality or consequences of sexual development, things like that. Is a way you can support them. And then also really important right now during their adolescence is nutrition. They are increasing in size, right? So you see this on a daily basis. Physical growth during puberty is going to require a much greater energy intake, right? They're going to get 20% taller. 50% of their weight is going to be added on during these years. So you really want to talk to them about their nutrition, right? Depending on their energy output. So is your child an athlete? Are they outside? Are they active? Or are they more of a internal, right? So staying inside, maybe they are artists, maybe they're musicians. So their caloric intake is going to have a range, right? So males anywhere between 2,000 and 3,000 calories a day, females anywhere between 1,600 and 2,400 calories a day. But you want to make sure that those calories are balanced, right? You want half their plate to be fruits and veggies. You want a quarter of their plate to be lean protein, quarter of their plate to be grains. And then you also want to make sure that you are adding dairy. You want that calcium component. It's really important because this is the time in their lives that they are laying down that calcium, so that hopefully in the future, they're not having osteoporosis issues. Okay, thank you.
Hello again, parents. Today I'm joined by my colleague Shang Vu, and we will be sharing influences on adolescent social emotional development, challenges your adolescent children might face, and strategies you can use to support them through this phase of their life. Adolescent development is influenced by the search for identity, association with peer groups, media, and also parental support. The search for identity is considered the most important developmental task. Central to adolescent development is the search for identity. During this phase, adolescents reflect upon their attributes, consider how they project themselves to others, and consider who they want to be. Adolescents explore their identity by expressing their views and exhibiting new behaviors with different groups in different settings. Many adolescents face uncertainty during this phase. And there are several aspects of identity we'll be talking about today. The first of those is gender identity, which is how adolescents define themselves according to gender roles and attributes. This also includes society's definition of gender roles and expression. This includes what it means to be masculine or feminine, and it has students asking themselves, how should I act? How should I dress? Physical appearance also plays a role in gender identity as well, as society sets forth expectations on outward appearance. We'll also be talking about sexual orientation, which begins during late childhood. Sexual orientation takes place in a progression, first starting off with awareness of their possible attraction to the opposite sex or same sex or both, which progresses to testing and exploration, then leads to identifying sexual orientation, then in part turns to disclosing to others. So at this point, they're deciding whether to come out to the world and share this with others. And also, the last phase is becoming involved in same-sex relationships. The third part of identity development is ethnic identity, which is a sense of belonging and association with an ethnic social group's beliefs and expected behaviors. Some of the influences on ethnic identity include parental ethnic pride and support, participation in ethnic social events, navigating cultural and majority cultural expectations. So when it comes to navigating these expectations, some adolescents have to choose between following family values set forth at home versus the majority culture, which can be more liberal versus more strict guidelines at home. And lastly, experiencing ethnic discrimination. This leads to children this leads to children honing in on their ethnic identity, going back to their group for additional support, and reinforcing their membership to that group. Next, we're going to talk about identity development. The first aspect of identity development is self-concept. So this is how adolescents define themselves according to their knowledge, skills, and abilities. So when thinking about self-concept, they think to themselves, do I have good study habits? Or in terms of athletic ability, they might think to themselves, maybe I'm not so great at soccer. Behaviorally, they might think about how they behave in most social situations. Also, in terms of popularity, they might think to themselves, I have a good group of friends, or maybe I'm one of the popular kids at school. Thinking of self-esteem pertains to how adolescents evaluate themselves according to their performance in different contexts. So this speaks to academic achievement, popularity, physical appearance, or athletic performance. And these aspects weigh in on their sense of self-worth. Next, I'll be talking about factors that affect adolescent self-esteem. The first of these, we're going to turn back to gender identity, which is the conformance or non-conformance to beliefs pertaining to gender roles and attributes. For example, masculine behavior versus feminine behavior. Some adolescents face challenges if they don't measure up to society's projections of these gender roles. For example, a girl who dresses like a tomboy some of her peers might say, maybe she should dress more girly. And this can affect self-esteem in that it affects the way that that student feels about themselves. The next is physical appearance, which is a strong predictor of self-worth. Society sets standards for attractiveness, which affects self-esteem and identity. And teenagers tend to be self-conscious about their physical appearance, which could affect their social acceptance. Next, we're going to talk about peer groups. Another important aspect of searching for identity is seeking friendship groups in which they share common interests, values, and behavioral norms. Relationships with peer groups provide social and emotional support. Next up, I have my colleague Chang Vu, who's going to share some challenges faced during adolescent social and emotional development.
Yeah, thank you for that transition. Hello, parents. So today, I hope you guys are enjoying the presentation so far. I will be covering the last part of our presentation. And so we will be focusing more on the challenges that adolescents face and what we can do to help our youth. And so to start, Eric, my colleague, has already started talking about peer pressure and fitting in within a social group. And part of the reason why fitting in with a social group can be bad, which it can be good as well, is the peer pressure fitting in. It could be influence of bad behavior from the peers, and also gateway to substance abuse, trying out different things and trying out new things until it keeps progressing and progressing onto substance abuse. And another one of the challenges that our youth face is the media. The media creates unrealistic expectations for body images, and it also glorifies high-risk behavior. So part of adolescent years is fitting in with the media as well. And the youth these days, everyone has their own set of social media and their own social norm within the media, and they will more than likely try to fit in with that criteria. And because of that, they also face high-risk behavior, drug use, and engaging in sexual activity. This is a pivotal moment in which our youth engages in drug use and engages in sexual activity, and it's all due to all factors such as media and peer pressure. Another challenges that adolescents face is disagreements with parents. It may not be good for the student to stay and hang out after school, whereas in some cultures they expect their own child, to stay and study and do all that they can to go into higher education. And so the challenges that adolescents do have and what the consequences are lots of consequences. So during adolescent years, long years of studies have shown that negative effect has been found to increase from early to middle adolescence and then decrease during late adolescence. So during the time in which they are beginning to become teenagers, adolescents, this is where their emotional and social and emotional development is at its highest, where they're the most affected. And another challenge that adolescents face is that they have reasoning abilities and decision-making skills, but in certain situations where emotions flare or peers exert pressure, adolescents have trouble accessing reasoning abilities and decision-making. So that goes back to peer pressure. It may not be the fact that they do not want to try out the drug, but it's because they are pressured to. They are more likely to do so. And another challenge is that adolescents who experience social emotional problems often partake in risky explorations, such as substance abuse. This continues on later into adulthood, which is the same thing that we talked about with peer pressure. Adolescents who are affected by loneliness and isolation are more prone to go and find comfort online. The risk of meeting unsettling strangers online are higher. And as we know, the internet, it can be a way to cope for adolescents who are facing their own social and emotional problems. And so what they do is they seek comfort online, and that has so much risk for strangers to come and also bring their own negative social and emotional development onto adolescents as well. And the lack of involvement from parents will hinder social emotional growth of adolescents as well. And so if parents are not involved with their child's life, then they are more likely to not develop socially emotionally in a positive note. Yes, and so on to the last slide, we will be talking about strategies that will support adolescents' social and emotional development. So children who are invested in their children's lives help develop children socially and emotionally. Attending adolescents' interests, as in if they were in a band class and you attend their band meetings or their band performance, that will help them grow socially and emotionally. Communicating with adolescents on a daily basis, knowing how they are doing in school, how they are feeling, also goes a long way. Adolescents are strongly influenced by their parents. Habits and teachings from parents provide adolescents with a strong sense of direction. This is extremely important because if parents have the talk or any kind of talk, set rules, guidelines for students or for their adolescents, they might talk about accessing internet, how unsafe it is to access internet. Sex education is also really great for their social and emotional development. Searching outside gender roles. So this one's really important as well because adolescents, while they are at this time of their lives, they also experience many negative social and emotional development that doesn't go along with the standard norm. So searching outside gender roles will be a great way to connect with your own adolescents as well. And parents who adopt an authoritative style of communication will assure adolescents with a sense of support and safety while maintaining expectations from adolescents. And so one of the things that authoritative style of parenting is that they talk warmly and they expect the adolescent to fulfill their goals. And one of the things that authoritative parents do is they never talk down on their adolescents. They engage positively with adolescents, and they provide warm responses to adolescents. And that is the main way in which you can connect with your adolescents. All right, and so this is just the references. We are at the end of our presentation. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for coming, and thank my colleagues for coming here and presenting with me. And is there anything else that my colleagues would like to say?
Don't forget to pick up your sheets for the STAR method at the back of the table so you could take home and practice with your children on those critical thinking skills. Thank you guys again for coming.